Welcome to the A Monday Moment with Dr. Mal podcast, where each week I, Dr. Mal, share life lessons and motivation to kickstart your Monday. Whether you're starting your day or winding down, join me or me and my future guest for a burst of positivity and a fresh perspective. Let's make Mondays meaningful together. Greetings and happy Monday, everyone. I'm your host, Dr. Mallory McCoy, and welcome to this week's episode of A Monday Moment with Dr. Mal. As always, may this broadcast bring you what you need in the present moment. May my light exude positivity and kindness, and may my love be extended to all who could use a little extra. Ashe. Let's seize the moment. Okay, y'all, this week's Monday Moment, it's juice worthy, like cold pressed, fresh from the source, juice worthy. I had the absolute honor of sitting down with Kansas City's own Chris Goode, CEO and founder of Ruby Jeans Juicery. Yes, the Ruby Jeans, KC's #1 healthy establishment. And baby, let me tell you, this man's story is as rich as the nutrients in his juice. From honoring his grandmother Ruby Jean's legacy to building a nationwide wellness brand rooted in health, access, and community, Chris is not just blending fruits and veggies, he's blending purpose and power. Now, you know I love me a good definition, and I'm team hashtag facts over feelings. So let's get into it. According to the CDC, 1 in 2 American adults have a chronic illness related to poor nutrition or physical activity. That's 1 in 2. 50% of American adults have a chronic illness related to poor nutrition or physical inactivity. According to the CDC, Black Americans, that's how I live my life, are 60% more likely to be diagnosed with diabetes and 40% more likely to have high blood pressure than white Americans. Nearly 23.5 million people in the United States live in food deserts, areas where fresh, healthy food is hard to access, especially in urban neighborhoods. In fact, Black Americans are 75% more likely to live in a food desert than white Americans. Run tell that. Studies have shown that entrepreneurship and wellness is growing, especially in communities of color, with Black wellness brands and plant-based wellness businesses increasing at nearly twice the rate of their counterparts. And absolutely, that's what is beautiful about Black people. When we see a deficit, we just create it. We are the original creators, so run to that. Yet, less than 2% of venture capital goes to Black-owned businesses, which makes every milestone and expansion that much more meaningful. And according to a report by Nielsen, Black consumers are more health conscious than ever, but only 1% of wellness brands are Black owned, which all important facts. So when we talk about wellness entrepreneurship through a Black lens, it's not just a vibe, it's real, it's vital, and it's revolutionary. All guest podcasts are titled What They Want You to Know, and my intention is to dive deep into the minds of experts, thought leaders, and fascinating individuals to uncover the one thing they truly want you to know about their area of expertise. I intend to unapologetically and unequivocally center the voices of people from powerful groups targeted by oppression. However, if there are other community members who can interject on the topic, they'll be invited to the cookout too. Well, as I said, today I am honored to welcome an incredible guest to A Monday Moment with Dr. Mal. Chris Goode is the CEO of Ruby Jeans Juicery, Kansas City's #1 healthy establishment, and the visionary behind Ruby Jeans Foundation and the newly opened Ruby Jeans Garden, a beautiful 1-acre community garden located at 29th and Wabash here in Kansas City. His journey through wellness entrepreneurship was born from a deeply personal place, honoring the legacy of his late grandmother, Ruby Jean, whose passing inspired him to create spaces where health, access, and community could truly meet. Chris brings a wealth of experience across multiple industries, from insurance to event management to construction, and has used every piece of his journey to fuel a mission centered around health, freedom, and empowerment. Through Ruby Jean's Juicery, his partnership with Whole Foods, and his juices in over 100 locations nationwide. Actually, during the podcast, I learned that it was like 106 and 107. You'll hear his service on the Kansas City Parks and Rec Board. And now, as the author of Ruby Jean's Garden, Chris is showing us all what it looks like to lead with passion, purpose, and heart. And honestly, I don't know Chris personally, but I have many people in my life who do know him or grew up with him. And actually, this interview happened because I was sitting outside of Ruby Jean's one day waiting on my business partner to come eat lunch with me. And he was outside of Ruby Jean's. There's a sitting area where performances happen during the summer. And he was finishing up a business meeting with his team. And while he was walking back to the building and walking past my car, I shot my shot out the window. And to my surprise, when I asked him if I could interview him, he said, absolutely. And so that's how we got to have this conversation. And let me tell you, I think that the energy that we shared in this conversation deeply touched us both. And as you will see, we both certainly experienced some emotions. I did not plan on this being an emotional interview, but it turned into that. And it was beautiful. And most of all, it was authentic. And so, you know, you're about to learn something. So grab a notebook and get ready to hear some dimes dropped from Chris. Here's what we talked about. Okay. Well, welcome to the podcast. I am so glad that you agreed to be a part of this podcast and for me to interview you. And so I would like for you to start off with introducing yourself to my audience.
Well, thank you for having me. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Chris Goode. I am the founder and owner of Ruby Jean's Juicery based in Kansas City, Missouri, and now expanding nationally.
Because I have listeners all over, can you share a little bit about how Ruby Jean's Juicery came to be?
Absolutely. So Ruby Jean was my late grandmother. My grandma was the backbone for my mom. My mom is raising four babies after starting to have babies at 16 herself. And so it lent itself to inherent struggle. And my grandmother living right down the street from us at the beginning of my life, she just stepped up. She was there for my mom. We spent a lot of time with my grandmother, and I fell in love with her at a very, very early age, and I can articulate it now, but as a kid, I just love my grandma, but now as an adult, um, I realized that my grandmother carried this posture of strength, of resolve, of fortitude, of joy, when really she had every excuse not to. And so, I think that as I look back, I realized that I was sitting at the feet of a superhero. Somebody that was able to love and nourish and empower her family in the midst of her own dire circumstances, her own struggle, her own lack of understanding, her own lack of awareness of even herself and what was good for her. The way that she loved us, most prominently from my mind's eyes through food. She would cook and she would cook and she would cook. Whatever's going on, whatever you would approach her with, are you hungry? What? Have you eaten? Why you got your, are you hungry? Like that was just the go-to. But that food that she cooked, that she knew to cook, coming from Muskogee, Oklahoma, by way of Bayan, Oklahoma, was soul food. Down home, heavy fried, heavily seasoned, large portions, nothing that was truly nourishing to our physical bodies, even though it truly did, I believe, nourish our hearts because of the way that she prepared it, the love that she put in it. There was a nourishing component to this food that was not good for us. But when I was 14 years old, my grandmother got sick and it seemed to be really rapid. She got rushed to the hospital. They ended up needing to try one last final effort to try and save her. She got transferred from what was Truman Medical Center over to St. Luke's on the Plaza. Whatever it was that they tried, it didn't work. She ended up on life support. We sent for my great grandmother, who we affectionately called Mom back in the day. And her name was Mabel, but that's not, we called her Mom. You know, great grandma was Mom. That's just who she was to our entire family. And so Mom comes up by Greyhound bus, just to say goodbye to her baby, to my grandma, Ruby Jean, and, looks around at us when she comes in like, this is it, family. And then goes in, has that final hour with my grandmother, Ruby Jean. Mom comes out to the waiting room, looks around at us again, takes this big attempt to grab air, collapses and has a massive heart attack. And so my great grandmother unexpectedly preceded my grandmother in death by 2 days after saying goodbye to her. And for us, and even I wrote this family magazine about all this when I was in high school. For us, it was my grandmother, my great grandmother, who we called Mom, her way of saying, "Hey, I'm gonna go meet you in heaven, and I'll be there when you get there." And so 2 days later, we took my grandmother Ruby Jean off life support. And as a 14-year-old kid, encountering grief for the first time ever in life at such a magnitude, it altered me. It altered my frequency of speech. It altered my thought patterns. It altered everything. Just the way I view life at a very early age. Because to be able to, see and feel that kind of emotion was just, it was a lot. But what I did was subconsciously I parked in my mind that this wouldn't be it for them. I knew that I had an obligation in some way to carry their story forward, to show people, their heroism through overcoming their own circumstances, their own lack, in many different ways. I didn't know how. I thought, I'd make it to the NFL and build some statue in front of my mansion or something. But lo and behold, God routed me to be able to share and use Juice as a conduit to share their story, my grandmother's story, in a way that is not, it doesn't speak to health as a posture of perfection or from this pedestal. It speaks to it from a place of just sincerity and just wishing with my very every part of my being that my grandma, had met a you, had met a me, had encountered someone that would say, you've been going right all these ways and this is the outcome, right? Well, it's time to go left, and this is how we go left. They didn't have that. She ate soul food and prepared soul food in a very loving way until it killed her. And so in 2015, I quit my job. I jumped out. I had gotten introduced to juice by way of friends in Los Angeles, had got into it myself, and started going to juice bars around the country while I traveled for work. I know I'm going far. I'm almost done. But in 2015, I started Ruby Jean's Juicery to not only honor, the life and legacy of my grandmother, Ruby Jean, but to also create a pathway for people to see themselves that don't commonly have the opportunity. For Black people and symbolism around food, you got old Colonel, you got a picture with Kool-Aid in it smiling at our kids, you got a king slinging burgers, you got this little girl with pigtails slinging burgers and milkshakes and fries, and we could go on and on and on. You got a clown, this joyful clown slinging burgers and fries and pies. And those are the characters that we fall in love with. We find safety in. We get excited about. We can drive past the Golden Arches and see the clown and like, whoa, we want that. And there's playpen areas and stuff in there, and it's on and on and on. And so Ruby Jeans now is, it's Black symbolism that is healthy, that is true, that is real, that it's not harmful. That is, it celebrates who we are. It keeps the nourishing foundation that my grandmother instilled in her food and in our hearts through her food. It keeps that, but it leaves the sodium, it leaves the processed sugar, it leaves the too big portion sizes, it leaves all of that. And so that's what Ruby Jean's Juicery is. And I know that's long winded, but that's what I'm up to.
Oh, and I need a second to regroup. I'm about to cry because, first of all, there was a lot of things in that story that you just shared. And I have read your story and I've heard your story many times from other people. And, but hearing it from you touched me. So, and there's so many things that you talked about in this story. The first, the story of the energy of love being poured into food, and even though the food itself wasn't healthful, it actually it's the energy of love through the food that sustained the people that were eating it and brought the people together that were eating it. That's what's so beautiful about
Absolutely.
Black culture, is that we can we can use the energy of love and put it in anything. We can put it in anything that we consume. We can put it in food. We can put it in entertainment. We can put it in conversation. We can put it in simply our presence. We can do that and we can shift the energy, even if the energy that we primarily consume is not good, the energy that we put in it is good. And so that is powerful. Then you talked about grief and how, because literally I just posted yesterday about the relief of grief. Both of those are happening simultaneously. And we just talked about two things happening at the same time. There is a relief in grief, because the relief in your grief was your grandmother didn't have to transition by herself. She had her mom to help usher her into this new space of freedom, which is wild that you have freedom behind you, because to be absent from the body is to be free. And so you use this, and then I can just, when you're talking about them, I can literally see both of their energies on you, on your hands, and in your heart, molding you into who you are and giving you the opportunity to have these experiences, to say, hey, Chris, you are the catalyst for morphine and transmuting the love that we put into you that may have been not been the most nourishing, but for you to turn that around and to nourish our community, to nourish our lineage. Because I mean, as a woman, I know that have spent time in my grandmother and great grandmother's womb. So not only had what they ate nourish my physical body, but what they experienced nourish my emotional and mental body. And so for her to, even at the beginning, when you were talking about this woman went through so much in her life where she wasn't nourished, but then she took that energy and changed it into nourishment for her family. Do you know how strong these Black women had to be in
It's
order
unbelievable.
to not get what they gave? And blessings on you. You got the one who was able to understand and transmute that. I unfortunately did not have that experience. My grandmother was so hurt that her hurt, she was bleeding on everybody else. She didn't know how to stop the bleeding. She didn't find the medium to stop the bleeding, my paternal grandmother. And in turn, she bled all over everybody else. I was raised by her. And so in my adult walk and in my spiritual growth, I had to forgive her, and not her as the adult her, but her as the inner child her who wasn't nourished at a certain point in her life. She was born in 1928. I grew up in an all white space. I grew up where she lived, country side on the other side of the state of Missouri. So my grandmother's family's from Warrenton, Missouri, and I grew up in Wentzville, Missouri, which you drive through to get to St. Louis, but
Oh
it's
yeah.
not it's not a stop, but believe it or not, we outside, we out there. We out there, but I just I had to forgive her. And she's no longer here. She's been gone since the early 2000s. But I had to forgive her for that. But one of the ways she did try to translate her love was through food too. So Chris, you and I are similar in that, but my grandma was country. She cooked every part of every animal. So, you would always have to be like, Grandma, what's in this? 'Cause
Right. What are we eating today?
right. And then she the big coffee thing of grease on the stove
Uh-huh. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
right there to
Oh
cook
yeah.
everything. So that was
Oh
the
yeah.
base of everything, and then
Mhm.
it just went back in that big coffee can of grease and then used again. And so yeah.
I got this cast iron skillet right here on my arm. Piggly Wiggly right here. Cause we would so like the cast iron skillet, it just set on the back right burner. Like that was whatever it was, that skillet is just staying there with a little thin layer of grease,
Yeah,
and the can is over there being
yeah,
reused. Like pour it in the can, you can use that again. That's still
yeah,
good.
yeah. So we grew up similar like that. And then my heart, because when you talked about these images that our children are relating to, and then the strategic placement of these images, right? Um,
Everywhere.
the, but how strategic are they? Because they're in the communities that look like us, primarily, and then you don't see healthful symbols, but we see healthful symbols now because thanks to Ruby Jean's Juicery, we do. And so just in that one question alone, just grateful for your path and even more grateful for the enlightenment because no thought is original and it doesn't come for us. So the enlightenment that was divinely given to you to say, hey, I may not have been empowered in my other positions, but I can move into my own lane and create this and be a wellness entrepreneur. So wow. that that was just a lot just to digest. So I know that you have spent, because I did a little research. You spent prior to moving into this lane, as you said, you were in insurance, you were in construction, you were in operations. How have those experiences prepared you for entrepreneurship and wellness specifically?
I would say the one I would point to in that regard, like immediately prior to jumping out and saying, you know what, I'm gonna quit my job, I'm gonna go for this thing. Even when God and I had the conversation where Juice was like, "Oh, this is why you exist." I was a catastrophe adjuster. And so I traveled the country for 5 years, adjusting large scale claims, everything from, following hurricanes up the East Coast all the way until they made landfall in Jersey, to earthquake claims in California and all kind of thing, ice dams up in Minnesota and everything in between all across the country. And the thing that I'm so grateful for that experience is that I got to see, the nation pretty extensively. But what I got to see, were people. I got to meet humans of all walks, very rich, very poor, hoarders, the most organized OCD you could imagine, every race, every sex, everything. I mean, down in backwoods in Tennessee, thinking like, oh man, this can't be it. This Confederate flags everywhere, and the nicest guys you would ever meet. I'm on a four wheeler, like, oh, so we got to go look at this shed down here, really? But the thing that I pull from is a refined level of empathy, because a lot of times, people when they're losing everything, water up to the middle of the house, a tree splitting the house in half, a hurricane completely demolishing the house, tornadoes. You see that we don't all have that much separation between us because this could be a really nice house, but in that moment, they're just attached to their pictures and whatever it is, and whoever it allowed me to see people and meet people where they are, no matter who they are. And so I'm grateful for that touch point with so many walks of life because I think as I built the bridge towards wellness, health is the commonality of all people. If you're not living the right way, if you're just living high on the hog, as they would say, and just eating whatever, drinking whatever, doing whatever, consuming whatever, and you're extremely wealthy, well, you're going to find your fate much the same of somebody that's completely poor and is being forced all this processed food and forced all these things just by way of their circumstance. And so there's this commonality between us that exists. If you're healthy, you get to experience this level of abundance and clarity. If you live an unhealthy lifestyle, there's nothing that's gonna protect you. And so being able to have empathy for people and talking about wellness is extremely important because health for a very, very long time, and I would say is still this way, is spoken from a pedestal, like from this affluent, like I have a 12 pack, you should too. Like I'm wearing these kind of tights, and so that gives me a certain level of, but that's not what it is for us. And so a long-winded way to say that, empathy from adjusting catastrophe claims has really embedded itself in my approach to business, to manhood.
So impressive. I'm like, yes, yes, you get it. You do. And so here we are. You're now and at this level, but let's go back to the beginning. So you are opening up your first Ruby Jeans space. What were some of the challenges that you encountered, especially in the area that you chose to open up and offering healthy foods?
So May 1st of 2015. And so I am getting ready to open the very first Ruby Jeans. It would have been 10 years ago. Um, the challenges that I encountered to even get to that point leading up to the opening were finding a place to do business. I got told no so many times. And I guess even before, finding a place, I had to get over allowing external doubt to penetrate my mind and my heart to even get started. Because I had that conversation in a hotel room in Schaumburg, Illinois, where I knew this is why I exist. And I knew this is what I was set to do. But then I look to have that very intimate understanding from God affirmed by the people around me, by my family, by my friends. And I didn't get that affirmation. I got doubt, I got jokes, I got worry, I got everything but affirmation. And so that was the first obstacle, was me shutting up and keeping my desire to do this very internal to me and my conversations with God, and then allowing that to predicate my actions. And so that was the first obstacle, ignoring what people couldn't understand or couldn't see ever. And then second was actually finding a place to do business. Once I knew, okay, it's time to go, I started trying to find a place, and no, 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 no. I landed in this one place, and it would end up being a very challenging circumstance when it's all said and done. But finding a place became the next challenge, and then capital. I mean, I took out my 401k early, took a penalty on it. I charged up credit cards, ruined my personal credit, borrowed a little money from a couple of friends, but capital became a very, very, very real obstacle. I mean, I got to opening day and was like, it's got to work, because if the people don't come, this is over fast. And by the grace of God, it worked. And
Oh, no, yeah. It was always going to work. But oh my gosh, so many lessons here. So many lessons. This is such a healing conversation for me because you, oh, there's so many lessons, but the no's, the no's. You said no to the no's. You were like, no. But before that, other people's fears and doubts. You were looking for that affirmation from them, but they couldn't give you because they themselves can't see what is intended for you. No one outside of us can see what's intended for us because, like you said, the conversation is here. It's not here.
It's vertical.
And so you are having, even though all of us are a reflection of God, you were having conversations because you needed to hear the fears so that you could make a choice with those. You could either say, "Oh, I'm going to hold the same fear that they hold," or you could say, "No, like what I think is more important than what they think. What we talk about is more important than what they." You had a choice that you made, and that's nothing but divine because now all of that prepared you for a moment like this.
Absolutely.
All of it did. So
All of
there's
it.
that. And then the no's, how many people stop at the first no? They hear no and they're like, okay, well, I guess I'm not supposed to be doing this. But it's for the people that are ordained to do what they're supposed to do to hear no, 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 no. And then the capital story. So I literally personally have experienced this too. Luckily, in my lifetime, God told me that I'm not supposed to struggle. So I have never struggled like I've seen people struggle. However, I quit my job in 2022 and I got my doctorate in 2024. And people were like, I mean, people close and far were like, okay, well, what are you going to do with your doctorate? And you should go be a principal. And I was like, I don't see myself being a principal. I don't see myself being put in a box because when I was in the box for 14 years as a vocal music educator, like I know I was in the space I was in, that was purposeful, but I couldn't do much. I couldn't advocate much. I couldn't move much. I was stuck to somebody else's schedule and stuff like that. So that doesn't feel right to me. It feels better for me to not do that. And then it's like, well then how are you going to make it? And it's like, well, I'm going to make it. But like you, I took out my 403B, took the penalties. I just finished paying off the penalty. Nobody's having the conversations like I'm having the conversation. God told me you're covered no matter what. And literally that has happened. I have been covered no matter what. I'd be like, oh, my bank account's negative. And it's like, oh, here's $200. And you're like, where did it even come from? But everything's been taken care of. So the bigger message is that if you receive something that you're ordained to do, it is your life purpose. You have to go with that by any means necessary. And you have to have almost a delusional faith. I have more faith now than I've ever had in my whole entire life. I'm hearing God say, wait. I'm hearing God say, don't do this thing. I'm hearing God say, do all of these things. And I'm like, but are you sure? Are you sure? And like, trust, have faith. That's why I do this podcast. And that's why I interview people because I know it helps other people, but by golly gee, it also is for me too. Yes, absolutely. So you are a wellness entrepreneur and you focus so much on the wellness of others, but I'm curious to know,
Oof. Oof.
how do you personally stay grounded and protect your own mental, physical, and emotional health?
It's a journey. It's a journey, Dr. Mal. I'll be honest. I mean, it is something that I am constantly bringing myself back to center on. In order to build a building with no blueprint, it almost, at times it takes the unconceivable, the unimaginable. It's a sheer force of not just physical force, but faith. And so it takes a lot of time to get to that. And so I'm just constantly trying to give myself grace, but just bite off little nuggets like, hey, go walk. Like you might not have the capacity mentally to make it to the gym today. Go walk. It's gonna help you clear your head. It's gonna make sure you're moving. And then be mindful about what you put in your body. So I'm not like my ideal physique or anything like that from a physical perspective, but I feel really good in my skin. You know, I feel confident in my skin, and I know that my hands are on the wheel. And I think that like a lot of my family, and you know, namely my grandma, she never realized that her hands weren't on the wheel. You know, really, you know, on autopilot from a health perspective. Mindfulness has been extremely important for me. Spending time with myself and being able to find clarity in my spirit, and just extending myself grace. And like, no, I don't have the abs that I want today, but you're doing pretty good, you know. You just stay with it, stay focused, and give yourself grace. So I think we beat ourselves up a lot, and we're chasing this idea of an absolute healthy experience, and I'm not there, you know. And so I know that, I don't know, that's probably vague and all over the place, but it's just a consistency for me, you know, just not getting through a week where you just haven't done anything, you haven't moved your body, you haven't thought about what you're eating, you haven't spent time with yourself. Because I think even at the beginning of my business, I was so keen on my physical appearance and, you know, my physical body, that I didn't realize that a big portion of my health is being blocked because I'm so overly stressed and I'm so overly consumed, and I can't even hear myself think, and I haven't spent any time with me. And so now at 40, you know, I'm finally making sure to remember that my kids, my wife, you know, they can't encounter a version of Chris that hasn't encountered himself. And so I try to spend time with myself and breathe. I've definitely over poured often.
But you said that the key thing is that, first of all, any way that we need to change or to make modifications in our life, it starts with being aware of the change. So for you to even name mindfulness as a way that you connect with your health is so important, because that is the catalyst to change. It's simply just knowing, like, hey, this is what I need to do. Secondly, I'm so glad that you pointed out that being physically fit doesn't equal healthful, and primarily healthful, because you can be a fit physical vessel and be sick, and we see it in real time. I mean, you get these people who have spent their lives like bodybuilding and stuff like that, and then they just bloop, pop over dead because, you know, that whatever they were consuming that wasn't the best for them. And we don't know, what they're consuming. But people often think of consumption as what we put in our mouth, but it's physical, it's mental, it's emotional, it's spiritual, it's financial. There's eight points of wellness intellectually. So we have to be mindful of the well-roundedness of us. And then I think what was even more beautiful and full of love is that when you said your wife and your children cannot even encounter a you that hasn't encountered themselves. Put it on a t-shirt. Put it on a t-shirt. You are dropping those gems today. That is perfect. Okay, so let's move into what you're doing, because how you introduced yourself was humble. But I felt like it was pretty reductive because there's so much that's happening under the umbrella of owner, and you're so much more. So you wrote a book, author, congratulations.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yes, Ruby Jean's Garden, right?
Yep.
A children's book. And I was just at the Carnival Arts event. I did not get to see you read that book because I was probably inside somewhere because I was freezing. It was cold that day. But that was cool to see you do that. And this book has actually been out since last year. And it was, my first time even hearing that you wrote a book. Beautiful. You also started a community garden. Uh, Tell us about that.
So the this book, so here it is. This is
Yeah.
Ruby Jean's Garden.
Yay!
It I didn't start my business knowing or thinking or processing that children would become a audience. You know, that teachers, parents, you know, mentors, people would call on me to say, "Hey, we want you to talk to our babies," and that would be little true babies all the way up to college students continually. And so when I would talk to younger kids, they would be like, man, we love our grandma, but cool, cool, cool. Where's the juice? Like, did you bring us juice, kind of thing. And so what I realized is that I needed to scale this story of my grandmother and my journey down to the articulation that children could digest. And so in 2019, I sat down 4 years after starting a business. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna talk to the kids. And I wrote this book. It just poured out of my heart. It's a very, very powerful book. It's not a long book, but it's so powerful. In reality, as you know now, my great grandmother and my grandmother didn't make it out of the hospital in 99. In the book, my grandmother meets a nurse in the hospital that reinforms her lifestyle. And so she meets a nurse that says, "Hey, we're not going to prescribe you any medicine. Here's the food, here's the movement. We got to get your numbers in check. And this is how we're going to do it." Very begrudgingly. My grandma at the beginning is like, "Hey, where's the fried chicken? Like, you are playing with me. Like, what is this stuff?" She's eating leafy greens, much to her dismay, but she gets it. She finds her rhythm, and in the book, my grandma comes home, and selfishly, it's written in a way that I wish it would have gone, but it also has created this through line where we love grandma. I love my grandma. You love your grandma. We love grandma as a figure. What happened to her? She got sick. How? Soul food. Okay. We love grandma. She got better. How? She met that nurse that told her about healthy food and movement. Okay, cool. What did she do with that? We love grandma. She shared it with her family. She started cooking healthy Sunday dinner. I'm in the book like, man, I didn't know healthy food could be this delicious. My grandma takes it a step further, the step that I've now taken in life, and she decides to share it with her community. So this newfound love and knowledge is giving her a second chance, and this awareness and clarity that didn't happen in reality. She decides to idealistically plant a free community garden on the lot next to her house at 3907 Wabash. You know where I'm going. So I
Yes.
wrote this book not with the ideal of starting a garden or not. This was just an idealistic ending. That my grandma is her house is on the front, her house is tattooed on my arm. She planted a free community garden. I wish it would have happened. Lo and behold, it would take years to find an illustrator. And around the time that I found an illustrator, my friend who's a master gardener, he would just say, "Hey, I think I could put a dent in your expenses. Like, we can grow a lot of this stuff." And I'm like, "Yeah, but man, logistically, it's a nightmare. I've tried to work with this and that. It becomes very challenging in Missouri." And so he's like, "I understand it." He names this one place. And he's like, I'm like, "Well, yeah, I know they did some stuff. They had some goats and, a few things going on there. What happened to it?" And he's like, "I don't know. Have you seen it?" I'm like, "No." He's like, "Drive by." And so I drive by and I'm just floored because I hadn't been by this site in a couple of years. And, what I'd known it to be was never truly bountiful, but they had some activity. There's some school buses and some chickens and some goats and a few things growing. But that's not what I would drive up to. It was trash everywhere. The fence was falling over. This old fence. The hoop house is halfway on the ground. Weeds taller than me over the whole ground. No trespassing. Do not enter signs. Just terrible. And so I'm like, whoa, what happened? So I reach out to the guy that I knew ran the operation, and lo and behold, he's since excommunicated himself from America. He has no intentions of coming back here. And so he decided that he didn't want to, and I'm grateful he had this posture. He was getting calls about it, but he didn't want it to fall into the wrong hands. And so I would call him, and I would end up acquiring this 1 acre piece of land at 29th and Wabash, 10 blocks from where I wrote it in the book. One of the most literal examples of manifestation and faith and writing it and making it plain in my entire 40 years. And so book got illustrated, purchased the land, Ruby Jean's Garden. At the time, a little bit before the time the book would even get published last fall, the garden would be real. So the book started it, the garden came, and then the book finished, and then we opened the garden.
I'm speechless. But also, because of where I'm at spiritually, I know um, that I just know that what we say and what we do is so powerful. And and like you said, the power of manifestation and the power of faith, your life, your life that you lead right now is a manifestation in itself. I literally felt like your grandmothers were like, this is what, and I mean, from what I know about your family, I mean, y'all don't let grass go under your feet anyway. So the whole family, but for you, Chris, to have this vision and and not only have it, but somatically feel it and put it in your heart and make it a reality. It's just there's so much the power of love, the power of manifestation, the power of divine faith, the power of just this all knowing that you're covered and protected, and like my steps are guided, and just I cannot make up what's happening here. So beautiful, beautiful. We talked about before we started formally recording about your journey to get Troost Avenue, where Ruby Jean's Juicery is. The name changed from Troost Avenue to Truth Avenue. And if you want to know the history behind that, for the listeners, it's a Google search away, but I would encourage you to look up and understand why it's important for Troost Avenue to no longer be Troost Avenue. And thank you, Chris, for leading the charge on that. Thank you, Chris, for leading the charge on keeping our city clean by starting the bus stop program through Ride KC, which is our local transit, the way that people get around. And you have a pledge to adopt 1,000 bus stops, which who's doing that? Who's doing this? Is That's what I'm talking about. This is beyond, this is not only wellness of the body. This is not only wellness of the soul. This is wellness of the community and every part of the community and every facet of the community. So let's not stop there. So Ruby Jean's Juicery is not just for the Kansas City, Missouri community, because Ruby Jean's Juicery is a national brand through Whole Foods and is in 100 stores, right? 100 stores,
106, yep.
106 stores, excuse me, nationwide. Nationwide. So when you started dreaming about this, when you turned your grief and transmuted that energy into wellness, did you ever imagine it would be like this?
You're gonna make me emotional again. You got a bright light, and you are phenomenal. Like I'm serious. I
Thank
can't wait to see where all this is headed for you. But I'm really grateful to be on your platform. I truly am.
you.
When I said, give me the question again. So you said when I started dreaming.
When you started dreaming, did you dream of this? And you're not done yet. I know you're not done yet. So did you dream that it was gonna look like this?
I didn't. I didn't. I didn't even. Like I didn't start Ruby Jeans thinking about money at all. Like at all. I mean, obviously, I thought about the money that it would take to start, but beyond getting the doors open that July 10 years ago, almost, I didn't think about the money. I didn't think about it at all. I didn't think about the growth of it. And so a lot of times you think about growing a business because of the inherent revenue that could come from it, but I didn't see it in that posture. When I dreamed this dream, God was present, and
Hmm.
it was just a calling so strong that, like I wish that my family had this earlier, and not just the physical representation of Ruby Jeans, but just the awareness of self and of our how powerful we are when we lean into being healthier, focusing more on, our well-being, and not just our bodies, but our surroundings, our everything, what we read, what we listen to, who we allow it to enter our spaces. And so when I dreamed this dream, it was an honest and sincere dream in the form of a prayer and really gratitude, because I knew when I got it, I knew why I existed, and it was so different than what I thought, you
Yes.
know. So
And what anyone thought for you, because you said at right at the beginning, you had these people. What about this? And then you're like, no, no, no. So it's so to rise above that adversity. And I only know a little bit about your background, but I'm sure you also had more adverse spaces where it could have went either way. All of us are a choice away from something adversely happening to us. You know what I'm saying? So
absolutely.
knowing that you beat the odds per se, that even seems reductive. But like how now your whole life has turned into a wellness ministry. It is. It's a wellness ministry, and how many lives you change by your existence, by you following the calling, by you listening to this persistent voice. I always call it in my life, I call it you remember that movie Jumanji, and the board is like thumping, 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 and then you get close to it, and then you're like, if I open this, I know I'm going on a journey. I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, it might be lions. Who
I
knows?
don't know what's about to pop out at me, but most people hear that thumping, 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 and then they get there and then they're like, oh, nope, because I don't know what's on the other side of that. Pick me. I was it. I just told you my release to receive story. Pick me. And then when I was like, okay, I'm just going to close my eyes and do it. There's the close eyes faith. Open it, do it. Then it's like blessings on blessings. Like literally, you're like, what was I even afraid of? So anyway, thank you for sharing that. I have a few more questions and then we'll be done. First of all, people get to call your grandma's name all the time. And the way I understand spirit and the way I understand transition is that when we transition from the body, that energy is always with you. Energy doesn't die, it just transfers. And so many people get to call on the energy of your grandmother through you simply naming your business after your grandmother. They get to feel her love too. They get to, with the brand name, they get to feel the love that you primarily felt and is trying to, or not trying to, did infuse into the communities and the hearts of people through juice. That's your vehicle. They get to feel her love. So that alone should feel like, whoa, that's an honor.
It was mind blowing.
Yeah, mind blowing. So the legacy of Ruby Jeans, when you think about the legacy and you think about what people are going to say, what do you hope they will say about the legacy of Ruby Jeans here in Kansas City?
I really hope that they know when they're talking about it, maybe in retrospect at some point, um, that it was real, that it was true, and that, they encountered an image, and through contradiction, they were able to pivot from it and use it for their own nourishment. That it didn't just exist in the celebration of this brand that's growing in awareness and scale. That not only did that business scale and do well, but that it dropped seeds all over the place, and that they were able to get one of those seeds and like allow something greater to come from it and grow from it just by virtue of encountering the brand.
You know, I love me a good garden reference. My business is called Bell's Garden, and my business is to support Black girls navigating predominantly white spaces in suburban spaces. And the garden, refers to the garden of the soul. So,
Mm.
you know, I love me a good garden reference. So that's beautiful. And then the questions that I ask my guests always are, first question, anything that you can think of. What's one thing you want us to know?
That's a lot I want y'all to know. But I think where my heart is right now, I think it's important that as storytellers, as sharers of truth, in an audacious way, that we should never get caught in just like why something exists or where it was sourced from, and why you should support it. I think it's very, 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 very important, for us as Black people, for us as a society, to move from narrative to action. And that's the privilege and joy that I find in my journey, is at 10 years in, and I would say the entire time we've been action, um, oriented, but now we're actively moving into the what we do about the why. What what we gonna do about it? We know why it is that way. We know that. We know, like, okay, well, she ate this and she cooked this and she lived here and they taught her this and he treated you like this because he went through this and they and this and that and it and that. What we gonna do about it? And so I think that it's important to, if even one person hears this and it moves them into action about something that they're passionate about, and that they can feel and they can know and they can narrate, effectively, that it's time to move. It's time to move.
It's time to move, baby. I was literally in a meeting yesterday at the Black Pantry with my friend, and she's starting a community organization. And she wants, people to help. And she's like, I see this. Let's mobilize like this. Like, yes, just do. Don't get caught in the what. Don't get caught in the details. Just do. And then the details will work itself out. We just had a whole podcast about, I don't know how this is gonna happen, but just do it, and then see. As Bruno Mars says, "Don't believe me, just watch." Just I love that. And the second prompt that I always ask my guests is actually a prompt. I used to think blank, but now I know blank. What did you used to think, but now you know?
I used to think that my time mattered for me, and now I know that my time matters for my children and other people.
Yeah.
It's not about me.
But they are parts of you. So it is not about you solely. But as we in the mother world talk about, the airplane reference, if you don't give yourself oxygen first, then you cannot protect others. So
Absolutely.
it is
Absolutely.
about them, but it's also about you first, because you want to make sure that you are well enough to be able to take care of them. And they're looking to you. They are looking to you. My baby, he's non-speaking, which there's gonna be an episode about that. Well, there already is an episode about that, but I say that to say his biggest sense is feel. When we take a sense away, all the other senses get bigger. So
Mm.
he is consistently observing me, and he's observing me through silence because he's not verbal. So it's like, to see some of the things that he does, and I'm like, oh, I do that. Or to see some of his facial expressions, and I'm like, dang, my face look like that sometimes too. Like they are sponges, and they are watching us like a hawk in the sky. And we have so much power. Even I think about my time as an educator, they only had that amount of time to learn from me. I was vocal music, so I had them kindergarten through fifth grade, but they only got that much time. I was responsible for whether they continued on with music or not. But they would always ping back to the experience that they had with me.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
So that's power.
It is.
Magic that we hold. So while they are certainly important, you are important too in that dynamic.
It's a boomerang. I mean, it's a boomerang. I mean, and
Yeah.
that I think that if someone carries a selfless posture, it's only possible through self, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I love people and I love the opportunity to be trusted by people and to be trusted by my family and to be, for my boys to know that, I exist for good and they get to carry that forward. So
Literally
yeah,
and figuratively. Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you for such not only a beautiful conversation, but I feel I've been using this analogy lately. And I told you at the beginning, I'm like, are my feet even touching the ground? I feel so full of joy.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for being so bright. And because I'm telling you, you got a beautiful spirit.
Thank you.
And, it's like a little gloomy, like, oh, but I mean, this super bright. It's like the sun is shining very vividly. So thank you for having me.
Well, that's all for me this week. I'm forever honored that you tune in. A special thanks to Chris Goode for an incredible conversation. I'm sure that you were able to grasp some things from our conversation. I'm thankful to be able to give him his flowers because he deserves it, and even more support him in the community endeavors that we do because we are all just walking each other home. We're very connected. All of us are one consciousness, and it's beautiful when we can come together to help support the community in any way possible. So, thank you, Chris, again for all that you do for the community. And I'm inspired by your work, and me interviewing you will further empower my journey helping the community as well. So I'm grateful for that. Next week, I don't know what shows we're about to have because I'm reducing the number of shows that I do because I've been pumping them out week by week by week. But because my life is so abundant, I gotta scale back some stuff. And so this is a time of pleasure and having fun, and this is fun too, but moving on to some other things for sure. But I'm sure whatever show is about to happen next, it's going to be grand. I can just feel it. So I'm sure you won't want to miss it. Why is my necklace doing weird things? What the hey? There it is. So until then, love and peace to all of you. Have the best week. Thank you for tuning in for a Monday Moment with Dr. Mal, now proudly a part of the Alive Podcast Network. You can find this show on the Live Podcast Network website and app, and you can find this podcast streaming across your favorite podcast streaming platforms. If you love to have the visual, you can tune into my YouTube channel, When Mallory Lives, to see this show and catch up on all my shows from the beginning.